Alrighty, so today I've got another deck guide. This time we're going to be digging into some Cad Bane. This is a Cad Bane Red deck. I'm going to be talking about all the cards in it, doing some matchup breakdowns, sideboards, some general strategy stuff. Hope it'll be useful. I think this deck is quite good. I've been testing it a lot. It works into a lot of matchups. As always, like with my deck guides, I know things can change over time. I may end up changing some cards. It is partially why I did launch a Patreon, which gives access to like all my testing decks and like all changes I make to decks that I do videos on. So if you want to check that out, link is in the description. Of course, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. It helps the channel out a ton. All right. So first up, why Cad Bane? So there's a few things that I think he does very well. Number one is board control. So he's giving you free damage basically every turn as long as you're building your deck with a bunch of underworld cards. Those pings can really add up to generate board advantage, right? If you're getting free kills on units through his leader ability without spending cards, then you are profiting. The other thing I really like about him is he's a 6-drop bounty hunter leader, and Relentless Pursuit is a very good card. It gets played in Boba Fett. It gets a little bit of a level up when paired with Cad Bane because Cad Bane can capture 6-drop units. We'll talk a lot about Relentless Pursuit later, but these are two really big things. Obviously, the McClunky synergy as well. I'll talk about that card a lot. It is an Underworld. It's doing 3 damage, so it's basically doing 4 damage, split between the Cad Bane and the McClunky. It's very, very powerful. In general, Cad Bane is a sturdy leader. 6-drop leaders are a little clunky at times just because, you know, they're coming out pretty late for the 4 and 5s, but they're not like huge enough to really swing games the way like something like a Vader or Palpatine does. So as always, 6-drop leaders have been in this weird gray area where most of them have not really pushed into like a tier 1 competitive viability. But I think Cad Bane is doing enough unique things and helping you in the early game enough through his leader side that you can bridge into that 6-drop turn. All right, why red? So you'll see in a moment the whole deck list. It plays 6 red cards in the main deck, 3 Ruthless Raiders and 3 Punishing ones. It's not a lot, and you'd ask, like, why aren't you just playing mono yellow? You get Cunning, you get Bodhi, you get Cantina Bouncer. Sounds great. It really is mostly about Tarkin Town and then kind of about Ruthless Raider. Tarkin Town paired with Cad Bane's ability is incredibly, incredibly powerful. It lets you swing the board turn 1 if you want to, but early on kind of no matter what, which is hugely powerful. Cad Bane leverages these pings so much better when the board is clear or only 1 unit, right? So if you're able to kill something early with Tarkin Town, you're able to then start using your pings as kind of targeted pings, not giving your opponent an option to do anything. They have to do damage to whatever 1 unit they have in play, which then makes it easier to remove that unit and add to your board as well. And that kind of cascades throughout the game, giving you situations where you have just 3 or 4 units facing none because you're just removing one every turn because you're honing your pings and you're getting efficient trades, and then bam, you're just generating board advantage that way. This does not work without Tarkin Town. It is the number 1 most important card in this deck. It is why I played red. Even if I was playing no other red cards, I think there's a chance I would still think playing Tarkin Town instead of like mono yellow, where you get all those power double yellow cards, would still be correct. Tarkin Town is that good in this deck. This second thing is Ruthless Raider. This is basically the best card in the game right now into the villain control decks, and those decks are on an uprise. Kira Green is a very popular deck now. I like Kira Green, obviously. I play that deck. I made a video about that deck. It is one of the harder matchups for Cad. I think control decks in general kind of like are eating up these like mid-rangey decks a little bit, especially when they can't leverage mass discard, which is hard to fit into this deck, although it will be part of our sideboard strategy. Even if you do leverage mass discard, it's sometimes hard to close out against them before they start playing things like Snoke and Avenger. But Ruthless Raider really is the absolute nuts against them, and way better than anything you would get out of mono yellow, including Bodhi. Definitely better than anything you'd get out of green, for instance, which is just a slower version of this that tries to leverage ramp. So yeah, Tarkin Town number 1, Ruthless Raider number 2. All right, here's the deck. We'll talk about the sideboard in a bit. I'll go card by card here, but like kind of talk about them in groups. So we'll go a little bit about the early game. We've got Greedo, we've got Crafty Smuggler, we got Dr. Evazan, we've got Cloud Rider, we've got Bazine Natal. These are all 2 drops, or Greedo's the 1 drop. They are all Underworld as well. Now, the shielded units, obviously, I really like shields. I talk about shields a lot. They're very sturdy. Now, Dr. Evazan, I know it has the giant downside. You don't play it willy-nilly against every deck, especially things that might just like power the dark side you on turn 2. But this deck has so many early units that having the option for an Evazan into a lot of matchups is quite good. It trades very well into opponents' early drops, and we play McClunky, and he's, being able to use him, get the value out of him, and reset him, and then just bring him out to your hand, then resource him later is fantastic. He's a pretty good play later in the game as well, just being able to play a very sturdy 3/3 with a shield, especially when you have other units in play to protect him from things like Power of the Dark Side. He's quite strong. Greedo is a very cheap Underworld unit. We obviously are bringing him with us. You can play a turn 1 McClunky with him if needed. Obviously, all these cards in general are triggering that turn 1 ping from Cad Bane, which means if you want to, you can Tarkin Town on turn 1. Often do that. Sometimes if you feel like your turn 2 play can be an efficient trade, and then you can play like a 3-drop Underworld into a Cad Bane Tarkin Town, that's sometimes better because then you're killing a higher value unit. But of course, that's going to be very context dependent. Crafty Smuggler, he's awesome. He's a smaller Evazan, but without the downside. Cloud Rider, fantastic. You can actually ambush for 4 with him because of Cad Bane's ping, right? So if there's only 1 unit in play, Cloud Rider could do a 4 ambush. That's very powerful. Also remember that all these cheap units, once you have Cad Bane in play, they start hitting for 2 damage off of his ability. So you get even more value out of these cheaper units, especially on his flip turn when you can play something before flipping him. And then bam, you can get 3 damage from him that turn. Bazine, we're playing 2 of them. Not so much an early game play, although if you have to, you have to. It still triggers the ping, and it still enables a Tarkin Town on turn 1, but it's a really nice thing to have access to out of the Smuggle row when needed to protect against like some really devastating cards. All right, the 3 drops, we're running 8 of them, 3 Bobas, 3 Punishing Ones, 2 Black Suns. Boba is basically the best 3-drop ground unit that we can play, and he's an Underworld, so that's kind of a no-brainer. Punishing One as well. Now, you can notice here there is no 7th Fleet Defender. It's a fantastic card, but it is not Underworld, and we are really, really focusing on getting a ping every turn. I think this deck, I've tried with less Underworld, with like 7th Fleet. The card's fantastic, but when you start not pinging, it means your opponent starts getting multiple units into play. And when they get multiple units into play, your pings start getting significantly worse throughout the game. And if you let up even once, that whole pinging plan just kind of falls apart when they're able to just, throw it on whatever and move on. It's like it basically did nothing. So that's why we're going with 8 Underworld 3-drops. The last 2 are the Black Suns. It actually took me a bit to remember that these were Underworld. They're quite solid. I think they're like good into Sabine because of that ping. It helps a lot. You can play them and they can shoot something on the ground. And then you've just kind of blocked space for a bit. Obviously, they trade into other space units that aggro decks might play. So it's just been a pretty effective unit to have access to. You get a little bit of a breather against a Fire Spray if you need it. Of course, the 3 damage it would deal to the Fire Spray plus a ping would then put that Fire Spray at 2. Which means that you've got a Ruthless Raider to finish it off. You've got a Cad Bane 2 damage ping to finish it off. So there's some like math stuff that work out with Black Sun, and I think it's quite good. All right, we're going to jump up to the top a little bit to talk about the tricks and Jabba together. So we are playing 3 Jabba. He's an Underworld. He's really big, and he is absolutely amazing in this deck because of the 5 1-cost tricks, meaning you can play Jabba and then immediately play any of those cards, making that Jabba turn, which is sometimes a little awkward because, you're playing 4 on a unit that doesn't impact the board too much, but because of how good McClunky is in this deck, Jabba into McClunky turn is awesome. Shoot first, we're playing a couple of them. They are mostly here, again, for aggro. They have some utility for helping your units beat sentinels that are bigger than them while not dying, right? So, that's good. But also, we just want to up our trick density a little bit. For a while, I was playing Waylay in that shoot first slot, but it was a little more expensive, and I really liked having the 1-cost suite just so that the Jabba turn itself was more powerful. Sneak Attack is the other one that we play. It's mostly here to play with Ruthless Raider to give this deck a little bit of a cheaty burst, often using that as removal as well. Like we play Sneak Attack with Ruthless Raider. You can do 2 damage twice to 2 different units or to 1 unit, and you get 8 damage to the base potentially, or 4 damage to the base and 4 damage into a space unit that the Ruthless Raider attacks. Sneak Attack Ruthless Raider is an absolutely amazing power play, and it's really why we're playing Sneak Attack. There are times where you just use it on an earlier unit if you need to, especially against aggro matchups. Sometimes it's okay to just play it so that you can cheat something out and trade. You make 2 for 1 yourself, but in some cases that's not a huge deal if you're able to keep board advantage that way. And the fact that Jabba gets this card means that it's drawing you a card, so it doesn't give you as much of that card disadvantage that's inherent to Sneak Attack. I think it's a very important part of this deck. I wouldn't really recommend playing this build without Sneak Attack and the Ruthless Raider. And since we talked about Ruthless Raider a bit, card's awesome. It's the only non-underworld unit in the deck, but it comes in with a built-in ping, so that's maybe doing the job. But it's so good against control, being that it also dodges most of the good removal that control decks play. It can double as incidental removal, especially because we do so much chip damage in this deck with Cad Bane. That 2 damage from the Ruthless Raider is often enough to finish something. The card's very, very good and is the second main reason, like I said, that we are in red besides Tarkin Town. Relentless Pursuit, I talked about briefly, and I will cover it in much more detail later, but it is very good with Cad, but we do also have a bunch of other bounty hunters that it can work with, and in a pinch, it can work actually on any unit, like Jabba or Ruthless Raider. There are also decent ways to just remove a unit, and again, removing a unit, even if it's temporary, is making our Cad Bane pings so much better. So Relentless Pursuit is very, very strong. Then we've got Forlom Zuckuss. These are kind of power play units. Forlom, especially being able to ambush for 5 because of the Cad Bane ping. That takes out Sabines. That is just very, very powerful. There's a lot of times where I don't even want to ambush with it. If you can play him, get a value ping, maybe finish something off with another unit, and just have Forlom chilling around so that you can Zuckuss the next turn is really strong. And into Zuckuss is really good even when you're not ambushing him. Turns out he's just so big. The fact that you get some damage out of him from the Cad is really strong, and he basically demands an answer, or he's just gonna delete whatever your opponent plays that turn. He is our chunkiest unit. We are not a very top-end heavy deck, although this is now in no way, shape, or form an aggro deck. It is also not playing to ramp or play into giant things, really. And Zuckuss is our biggest hammer in terms of actual damage on board. And the last thing I want to talk about here is Fenic. Fenic is going to get her own slide, so we can talk a little bit about her math, but Underworld is great, right? So she ambushes also, so you add that 1 damage to whatever she's doing. And of course, she can trade up pretty tremendously. Fun part about this deck is that it does very consistently turn up a really big Fenic, and we'll go into more detail a little later. All right, the sideboard. So this is a very linear sideboard. It's 2 no bargains, 3 pillage, 2 force surrender. That is 7 discard-oriented cards. Now, no bargains are tricks. They work well with Jabba. Jabba drawing it, and then you playing it is a lot of card advantage. This plan is very focused on playing into control decks. I think it works decently well when you're able to also control their units early on, meaning that you are ahead on board from the early games through Target Town and your pings, so you're more easily able to kind of take turns off doing something like a pillage or forced surrender when it comes up. These are not replacements for like playing to the board. They're not going to win you games where you fall far behind on board, but I think in conjunction with the way this deck already operates, it's a decent sideboard plan into control decks. And the last three are the Gamoran Guards. They are Underworld. They are Sentinel. You bring them in against Sabine and some other aggressive matchups, and they work pretty well. All right. This is a why not section. So there's two cards here I want to talk about because I see them very often in Cad Bane decks, and I want to talk about why I don't run them. And the first is Toro Calican. Basically, I don't run him because he's not Underworld. I think it's just too important. I noticed that the games where I wasn't playing an Underworld every turn were the games I would just fall behind on board. You really need that Cad Bane ping to go off. And although we do play a decent amount of bounty hunters to like ready up the Toro, we don't really play any ways to buff him significantly. So he doesn't really do that bursty crazy stuff. And on top of that, again, this is not an aggro deck. And even if he did like ready himself once or twice, pushing that damage in is not always the most important. The other is Xanadu Blood. Now, I know this is like Cad Bane's ship. It's kind of supposed to be good in the Cad Bane deck. I just don't think the card is very good, unfortunately. I think it's very slow. I think it's actually kind of doing the opposite of what we want in returning units to our hand. Now, like McClunky is awesome, and we do that with cheap units that we can usually immediately replay. But we don't actually want to give up board advantage. It's kind of like the whole point of this deck is to like be ahead on board and to have more units than your opponent. I don't find this on-play effect super impactful, especially because like to exhaust something, it means you're also removing one of your own units. So, and on top of that, the resource sniping ability on it, I found way too situational and mostly involves a bunch of guesswork because often you don't even know if that's going to impact their turn significantly. I just think Ruthless Raider is like 45 times better than this card, and I don't really think I want more like slow drop 6-drops. All right, so the Cad Bane pings. Talked a lot about Tarkin Town. How best to utilize these Cad pings is by making it so that your opponent only has one unit, right? So that you know where the ping is going. Ambush units are very good at establishing things like this because you are allowed to ambush before using Cad Bane's ping. They are both when played effects. So, for instance, your opponent has 2 units in play. One of them has 3 health. One of them has more than 3 health. You can always Cloud Rider first. You kill that 3 health unit, and then you activate your ping, and you get it targeted at whatever you wanted. And this works the same way with Ford Lam, of course, and later in the game with like Fenic. And that's a very good play to make. Now, McClunky, it doesn't work that way. You have to resolve McClunky first. I just wanted to mention this. You have to finish the resolution of McClunky before you get the ping, which means that 3 damage has to go into something before the ping. Which, is maybe a little bit of a downside. Like if your opponent has 2 4 health units, if you could do the ping first, obviously you ping and then the McClunky could finish it off. But in this case, you have to do the 3 first, and then your opponent can then put that 1 damage into their other 4 health unit. McClunky is still one of the best cards in this deck. I just wanted to make that clear. Other things you really need to look at is like how to best utilize the Target Town so that like you get tons of value. Like you don't have to target down the first unit, right? If your opponent leads with something like a Sabine, you can play a Crafty Smuggler into that and ping. And I don't think I would shoot Tarkin Town at it because you can now either force them to trade with your Crafty or you get a kill on their Sabine. So you can save that Tarkin Town for their turn 2 play where it might be like a Fighters for Freedom or a red 3 and you play your like Boba Fett unit and then bam, Tarkin Town that red 3 or something, right? And you've saved yourself from using it early on. It can be way more impactful in that sense. Of course, against energy conversion lab decks, you want to maybe think in the back of your head if there's ways for you to maneuver the board state in such a way that you don't need to use it until they do something like a Poe ambush, or in like a Kira deck, like a Gideon or a Lone Pike ambush, just so that you can finish off that unit with the Tarkin Town. It's so good in this deck, but you only get one shot at it, so you have to make it count. Other things, passing first. I often will just pass turn 1. It's mostly okay if your opponent then claims. You don't have to play a card on turn 1. We are not an aggro deck. There are matchups where I would say, like, forget, it's fine, just like play out your unit, especially against like a Kira deck. I would just play like my crafty, let them play their Pike Sentinel or whatever. You can always just play your 3-drop and ping that Pike Sentinel on the second turn so that they can't shield it and get your value trade online anyway. So there are matchups where I would not be playing like a pass game. It's mostly against control, but against like Sabine, they're going to play a turn 1 unit. You're just passing because you want to get that ping no matter what. Against things like Bosk, for instance, you have McClunky, which is so good against them that like you're also comfortable passing. Against Han decks that might like old Han that might like ramp into an Ezra, of course you're just going to pass and let them play something. It is just pretty useful to pass. Your opponent might be incentivized to just claim and skip the first turn, thinking that you're like an aggro deck that's falling behind, but you really aren't an aggro deck, and you want that unit control. So if they're not playing anything on turn 1 and you're not, then your pings are still going to be targeted in the following turn, and you're kind of cool with that. All right, Jabba. I don't need to say much more than what I did already. I like having like 8-ish tricks in the deck for him to really make him more consistently draw a card. McClunky is a no-brainer, and Sneak Attack is a no-brainer, which leaves a little bit of flexibility. I have opted for Shoot First, no bargains in the sideboard. Of course, Waylay is probably the next option and one that I would very much consider in those slots. There's Asteroid Sanctuary, which in this deck I don't think is exactly what I would want to do, because again, exhausting a unit doesn't really put us ahead on board, while Shoot First, if we can kill something, again, we're keeping a unit, they're losing a unit. Our Cad Bane pings are now online further. All right, Relentless Pursuit. Promised you a little bit more on this. So what's so important about being able to hit 6 drops? Well, that's Fire Spray, that's Wrecker, that's Ruthless Raider, that's Obi-Wan Kenobi. There's a lot of 6 drops being played right now in very good decks, right? Obi-Wan in the Han Blue decks, Fire Spray in the Boba decks, Wrecker in Sabine, Ruthless Raider in this deck, in any like villain red deck that may be around. Relentless Pursuit is a very powerful card. Like I said, being able to remove something makes our Cad Bane pings better, but we also have a bunch of bounty hunters. Getting that shield, again, helps us escalate further because we're removing something, then possibly our shielded bounty hunter can remove something, and we just stay ahead. Relentless Pursuit is a very good card, and being able to do 6 on it is also amazing. All right, a little bit of Fenic Shan. So we play a lot of 1-drops, right? We got Greedo, McClunky, Shoot First. We play like a billion 2-drops. We play 8, I think, 3-drops, 8 3-drops units, and then we also have like Relentless Pursuit. So we have more 3-drops. 4-drops, we got Jabba, and we have Forlom. At 5 and 6, we only have 3 cards, right? We've got Zuckuss and then Ruthless Raider. But I think very consistently we can get 4 different costs into our discard pile. If we can get one of the 5 or the 6, that is very big, because being able to do a 5, like if you can get her to do 5 damage before she even has to attack, that is a little bit of a sweet spot into one very particular card, and that is Snoke, which is an absolute hoser. And Fenic Shan was what I kind of opted on after testing to be like my answer to Snoke, because that card shuts us down pretty hard. If Snoke's the only unit in play, you only need 5 different costs with Fennec because of the Cad Bane ping. Potentially 4 if you have Cad Bane in play, because then he does the 2. And if you have 5 different costs, she can kill him even through a regular Cad Bane ping. Of course, she can kill a Snoke with 4 or less just up front because she would still hit him for 2. So she can kind of kill the trade with the Snoke regardless. But in general, Fennec has been absolutely awesome even outside of that. I've really liked playing this card. It's felt basically like a Han Solo, except sometimes better, which is kind of wild because Han Solo is incredible. This card has been absolute gas. Of course, it being an Underworld does bump it up quite a bit in a Cad Bane deck, but it was a card I recently shouted out as I think it probably needs to be seeing more play, and here I am playing it more and really liking it. All right, a little bit on matchups. So this isn't going to be like I'm not going to like break down everything possible, but I want to talk a little bit about the 5 that I think are the most popular decks. So Sabine, we covered it a lot. We're all about getting board advantage, and we do it really well. Sniping Sabine's turn 1 play with a Tarkin Town is very powerful. It then allows us to like continue escalating with like things like Cloud Rider into Forlom to get like board advantage. McClunky, of course, is very good at basically killing any unit they would play because 3 and then plus the 1. So even if they're playing like something like a K2 or Fighters for Freedom, you're usually able to kill it. You have shielded units to help stay stabilized on board. Forlom being able to one-shot Sabine if it lines up. Going up into like Zuckuss, which bricks a little bit of their Poe, right? Like they Poe you Zuckuss. They may be forced to trade at times into your stuff. Poe in general is a little scary just because of his like ambush being able to like kill a shield. But again, if you've escalated in such a way where you have more units than them, you're usually able to just finish him off with whatever you would play, or even just like finish him off with a Cloud Rider ambush. Once you get a Cad Bane out, especially if you have something like Relentless Pursuit to eat their next big unit, you're usually able to just kind of like run away from there. They can get you in that mid game if you like stumble off of one of your turns, if you don't have like the right answer. But we have so many things like Shoot First and McClunky and then the ambush units that we are usually able to just kind of like keep them from sticking units and then kind of catching up through the Sabine flip through their Poe, through their record turns with our like bigger stuff too, and then kind of take it from there. Bobo yellow, we are also the control deck here. Pings are so good into the shielded units that are really the most obnoxious things for us to deal with, like Crafty and 7th Fleet Defender or any other shielded stuff that they might play. Our units trade favorably into the early stuff, especially with the pings, right? Like Bodhi isn't scary at all, even if he rips a card, because basically anything we would have would like ping plus kill it. Same with like even their 3/5s. Our 3/5s are better because they come with free damage. Like our Boba is just better than theirs. Our punishing one is better than their 7th Fleet because we get a ping, so it can eat it for free. Of course, the scary part is the Boba turn, but we are able to like on our 5 resource, we are able to play like some big stuff potentially, and hopefully have more units in play already than them that we're able to action churn a little bit, possibly just slam a Zuckuss, and after they've spent some resources so that they can't bounce him, and then he's just like an existential threat for them. Of course, we can sneak attack a Ruthless Raider that turn to really try to clean up the board, get a bunch of damage in on them, and go into our Cad Bane turn. Cad Bane is a pretty safe flip into their deck, because they can't really do 8 to him all at once, which then leaves open like the options for something like a Relentless Pursuit, eating fire sprays and stuff like that. So that's kind of how I would handle that. With Kira, it's very tough. They don't care nearly as much about all this pinging stuff, and the Kira flip is really damaging to our shielded units, and the fact that we do play a lot of 3-power units and less. Barrage obviously is problematic for us, and then their late game of Vader Snoke is problematic as well. But we do have a massive sideboard for here, which is what we're really focusing on. We're going to try to spend our early turns just getting through their things like Pike Sentinels. Obviously they might ramp early, but then we have things that can maybe kill Kira pretty quickly, kill something like a lone Pike if they play it, especially because we have the Tarkin Town. And then from there, if we're able to like have a unit in play or something that they need to answer, and we can start playing discard and really ripping their hand apart. we can kind of bridge into a Cad Bane turn. Again, Cad is pretty safe flip into that deck as long as you have another unit in play. They've got Power of the Dark Side. I mean, some people might be playing Rival's Fall, but in that, I don't think that's usually going to be a massive blowout for us anyway. And of course, we're playing like 7 post-board discard cards, so hopefully we can really force them into some awkward choices. It's going to be tough, and I know from experience that Kira is going to be a problem potentially, and definitely is a reason why I'm playing so much sideboard stuff for that matchup. The young Han blue deck, of course, having pings and Tarkentown makes their leader ability much worse. They're already doing free damage into their stuff. Their best stuff against us are the things that give them card advantage, like Yoda and K2. Not so much like the discard cards; they'll fall too far behind when they do that. But if they're able to just like force us to use cards to kill their units, and then they're not really losing cards because they're either drawing or making us discard, then it sometimes gets tough to catch up in card advantage there. But when they don't line up like exactly Yoda into K2, it becomes a lot easier because we do create very good early game trades, and they don't have very clean ways to like kill most of our stuff. Like, it's just expensive removal, and we're kind of cool with them just playing expensive removal. It's like, it works fine. Like, if they have to like take down something that we've already like attacked with, or that costs less than takedown. And Fell the Dragon barely hits anything in this deck outside of Zuckuss, I think. So it's a little awkward for them sometimes. So yeah, just like they're gonna have to play a little more fair because of how good the Cad Bane ability is into them just like trying to cheat out units. Of course, Tarkentown will put us ahead very early in this matchup, kind of no matter what, but we would prefer to save it for something more impactful like a Kanan or something like that. Obi-Wan, of course, can be a problem, but we have Relentless Pursuit. We also have Zuckuss. Like, if they play Obi-Wan on the Han turn, I've often just played Zuckuss into that, and then they're not really allowed to deploy because we can just claim and then one-shot Han. And a big thing about mitigating this deck is trying to kill Han on the 6 resource turn, not on the 5 resource turn. So like when he flips, it's actually sometimes better to let him live until the next turn and kill him then, because that bricks the Luke turn. They can't play Luke on 6 if Han dies on the 6 resource turn, and it is a big way you want to target this matchup. Kind of in general, like I would say, this isn't just for Cad Bane. Look to try to find ways to kill Han on that turn, because their 6 resource turn is way worse when they cannot play a Luke. And lastly, mono yellow Han. It's not vastly different than anything else that's going on here. It's a little weird for them to try to cheat out a unit on turn 1 because it's just going to die to Tarkentown no matter what. So their like first turn is usually just like way worse than our first turn, because they'll like play Crafty Smuggler, and then our Crafty Smuggler will kill the shield with our ping. They don't have very many good 2-drops in that deck, so they fall behind pretty quickly in my experience to a Cad Bane, and it's really hard for them to catch up. They're playing a tempo game where they're going to try to play things like Cunning, but like Cunning is so bad against Cad Bane, especially when they're behind on board already. And then like Tech DJ is a joke. It's not going to work here. Like, we have Tarkentown, we have ambush units. It's just very hard for that to even like come remotely close to affecting us. So overall, I don't think it's been too bad of a matchup for Cad Bane to maneuver. All right, I wanted to wrap up with just some other options. So of course, like I mentioned, I will keep working on this deck, and I will change cards and practice different things. If you want to keep up with my live updates, that's what the Patreon is for, so you can check it out there. But these are some cards I will definitely be playing around with, or have played around with. So this Hot Shot Blaster Jetpack, like, I really like having some of this reach in the Smuggle row. I just found it very hard to fit it right now. I'm already playing 14 events. I think there is room for a couple more. So like playing, like, I probably play the 2 jetpacks before the 2 blasters currently. But fitting it in definitely means you need to cut some units, which then becomes a little bit more precarious because our entire sideboard into control is like adding 7 more events into the deck. And if we're already cutting a couple units before that, then that matchup gets a little weirder, and we might need to actually just like cut the jetpacks against control or something. But there's options, and I think both that and Hot Shot Blast are definitely worthy considerations. Force Choke. If you want more options into Sabine, I would play Force Choke. It is very good against them. It was in the sideboard for a while, but I opted for Gamorrean Guards because I think they have like some more fringe uses against some other things, especially decks where like Jabba is just too slow and clunky. You just play the Gamos as a better 4-drop. Cartel Spacer is an underworld unit, so it's definitely fair game to be like, I don't want to play like Evazen. I'm too horrified about like the downside. I'm just going to play Cartel Spacers. Knock yourself out. I think it's a very reasonable choice. No Good to Me Dead is a card that I think it's good into Sabine. It's good into Boba as well, trying to mitigate his flip turn a bit. So definitely an option into those matchups. Merc Gunship basically falls in the same spaces like Cartel Spacer. It's an underworld ship, 2-drop. If you want to just have another 2-drop instead of Evazen, or maybe you feel like Bazine is too cute and isn't really helping you that much into matchups, you can just play a more aggressive 2-drop. Waylay, of course, is a trick. So if you haven't been liking Shoot First that much, maybe you try Waylay. I wouldn't touch the sneak attacks or the McClunkies, of course, but Waylay is definitely an option. And lastly, Bounty Hunter Crew. This is pretty cool. Is Underworld, of course, so he's another ambushing Underworld unit. The buyback here, now we don't have like many like incredibly impactful events to buy back at that stage of the game, but actually paired with like the discard cards that we bring in from the sideboard, I think it becomes a little more interesting if he's like buying back like Pillages or Forced Surrenders. But then again, now that's an even larger sideboard package, so you can consider maybe saying, okay, I won't play to like, I'll cut a Pillage and a bargain, and then play like a couple Bounty Hunter Crews, and like he's the redundancy in that discard potentially. All right, that's what I got for you. I have really liked this deck. I have identified that control is an uphill battle, but I think there are ways to fight that matchup. It is not unwinnable by any means. It's just a pretty tough one, but like no deck doesn't have tough matchups. And we try to fix that as much as we can with the sideboard. And as you saw, it is a very heavy discard sideboard. Other than that, loads of fun. It does take a little like practice just to like get your sequencing down. You'll have games where you just like fall behind and you can't catch up because your pings become really useless. But once you learn kind of like the sequencing and like how this kind of plays out, especially the using of the Tarkin Town, you'll notice that you'll have games where like you have 3 or 4 units and your opponent has none, and like it's turn 6 or something. And this like kind of happens a decent amount just with the way the deck escalates. It doesn't like push tons of damage early, but then like it controls the board and adds to the board, controls the board and adds to the board until you're at a point where you can just like bam, hit for like 13 in one turn because you have so many more units than your opponent. And of course, we have Surprise Strike, a card that I think I kind of forgot to talk about when I was doing the whole deck breakdown, but it's in there because it's like awesome. You play that card in like all yellow decks. All right, that's it. Please like the video, subscribe, and catch you next time.